We're good? Good morning, everyone. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see so many of you here this morning at Olympia. Welcome to this session on how to create a frictionless digital employee experience in 5 steps. So welcome to all of you here today. It's great to see so many of you. And a big welcome to those of you joining online as well. My name is Louise Johnston and I am the Head of Customer Success here at Phase 3. And we're joined by James Proctor, who is our Director of Professional and Managed Services. Before we start, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about Phase 3. We are the leading providers in people technology and we've been in the industry for 18 years. We maximise the value that you put on your people tech to ensure that you get true return on your investment. And we do this from the cradle to the grave of your technology. So depending on where you are in your digital journey, we can help you to select new tech, whether or not that's something that's manual based at the moment. We can help you become more digital. If you're already using technology, we can do system reviews to help you to see whether or not that's actually the right fit for you. So starting right from system selection, we are independent from any of the vendors here today. We help you choose the right technology for you, take you through your implementation project, and then help you develop that technology thereafter. And we do that through a wide range of service delivery options. We take pride in our team. We are the people behind technology. And what sets us apart is that we actually all have a background in human resources and payroll. So that means that we get it. We didn't necessarily come into this industry to work in technology, yet here we are. So something we really take seriously is bridging the gap between people and the tech. Something we firmly believe in, as your people are your organisation. And that's why we're here today to talk about the digital employee experience. So what do we mean by digital employee experience, or DEX, or DEX for short? Well, over the past 12 months, we have really seen the world of work evolve. We've got hybrid working, remote working, and anywhere working. This means that the needs of your employees has really changed, and that means that HR have to behave differently. We're expected to have open communication with our staff. We're expecting a more personalised service. And employees are expecting mobile functionality to work on all services and really support that hybrid working that we're now seeing. And this is all what's going to make up your digital employee experience. It's something that really can't be overlooked, especially in the war for talent. Sometimes the DEX is the only experience that your employees are actually going to have with your organisation. For example, through the pandemic, Phase 3 continued to recruit. So that means we were interviewing and onboarding people all the way through lockdown, and it was all done online. And it was the only connection that those employees had with us to start with. So if that had been disjointed or difficult to use, it would have placed a big value on how those employees see your organisation. It speaks volumes on your people first strategy. And if your organisation wants to put their people first, then the digital employee experience is something that we can't get away from. We're seeing the gap continue to widen. We've got people prioritising their decks. There's a greater disparity now in people who are embracing the new normal and designing their employee experience strategy around today's world, and then those who are still waiting for things to return to the way they were. I mean, quite frankly, we know that that's not going to happen. And this has big impact on your employee retention, on their productivity and their well-being as well. So for me, the digital employee experience, an easy way to think of that is about the consumerization of HR. Employees are consumers of the organisation and they're consumers of your service as well. So this means that businesses are forced to start competing with each other, as the DEX has employees have had as consumers elsewhere is going to link back to where you are as your organisation too. It's expected that the work technology should perform at the same level as our favourite consumer apps. In 2021, Applaud HR carried out a survey to see what the trends would be for 2022. This survey was carried out across 200 different leaders in different industries to understand how they tailored their employee experience and their plans moving forward. The first trend that we saw was the rise of the mobile-first workplace. We live in a mobile world, and it's said that we look at our devices up to 58 times per day. I mean, personally, I think, especially maybe for Generation Z, it's going to be even more than that. So this means that your mobile tasks really do need to be easy. They need to be something that employees want to use, and it should aid them in their roles as well. It shouldn't be a hindrance. And as I said before, with Generation Z coming through, these people are digital natives. They were born into this mobile era, and they're expecting things to be an easy-to-use apps across a range of different devices. The second trend is hyper-personalised employee experiences being on the rise. Now, this is that seamless personalisation. We're going beyond a branded template. It moves way beyond a first name being used in a bulk email. It's that seamlessness that we find on Facebook, Netflix, or Instagram, where that content is tailored towards the individual. The leading organisations have personalised feeds based on employees' roles, based on their geography, and based on their behaviour as well. A good example of this is if you notice that one of your employees is constantly looking at an internal vacancies page, or they're looking at different training opportunities, it's indicative that that employee is looking for a change, and HR can tune into this and use that towards your advantage. Of course, we're seeing hybrid, remote, and anywhere working being on the rise. This is all accepted now. In fact, 94% of businesses have at least some remote workers. People are choosing now to work from home, but the digital employee experience is lagging behind that. During lockdown, many organisations made quick purchases of Zoom, and really that was done without any sort of strategy. So with people actually having a preference now to work from anywhere, it's putting more and more pressure on HR to get together and build their digital employee experience. It is a mouthful. Their DEX strategy around those models, and not just around 9 to 5 working. This means that there's more agility being demanded from HR. Now, this is an interesting one. 50% of organisations stated that they can't update their HR portal without input from IT or from a developer. Now, I personally think that it might be more than that. My background is HR. I'm not afraid to say that. But that means that HR are lagging behind, because it means whilst we've got employees working in different places, on different devices, and in different environments, HR have to act with agility and with reactiveness in their communication. That reliance on IT, that reliance on your developer, is only hindering us and our ability to service employees as a consumer, and to service those employees of how they expect in this day and age. The final trend is that employers must do more to manage employee burnout. We've seen plenty at the show here today around employee well-being. And although the modern era is fantastic, it's great that we can be more flexible and we've got this hybrid working, it means that there is that increased risk to burnout. Managers aren't seeing those social cues from employees that they might be struggling or need some help. We've got people hiding behind screens. We don't really know what's going on. And with home and work life being more blended than ever, it means that businesses really have to think about how to operate a healthy work-life balance. And again, the digital employee experience really can help with that. So I'm now going to pass you over to James, and he's going to take you through 5 easy steps to ensure that your digital employee experience is fit for your organisation.
Thank you, Louise. Okay, so I thought I'd start with a practical example before we jump into the first step. As you know, you've probably been walking around the show and you've had these badges and they've been scanned by all of the teams that you visited at the stands. And what happens with that data is it gets entered into the vendors and the providers' CRM systems. And then over the course of the next few weeks, you're going to start to see content being sent from those providers, specifically around the conversations that you've had. So if you've mentioned that you're interested in payroll outsourcing, for example, you're going to start to see content being drip-fed over the next 6 months to give you some more information about those products and services. And the key question is, why aren't we doing that as HR in terms of the support that we can provide to employees? I think the first step is around the investigation. So what I ask everybody is, when was the last time that you sat in the driving seat as an onboarder, as an employee, to see how your systems actually work for those people? When was the last time you applied for a role in your organisation as a brand new candidate and went through that process? And it's really important to do that and to wear the hat of those individuals. Sit in the seat of the finance director and a new manager, for example, to see what experience they get from the software. And it's really important to look at the infrastructure as well. Is there something in the way that your systems are set up that prohibits the passage of data from system to system? And are those passages of data in real time, or is there a lag? Can we see if there is any impact on the endpoints, for example? And by endpoints, I mean, how are users engaging with your HR service? Are they contacting HR by telephone, using a phone? Are they accessing self-service online? Do you have a SharePoint site, for example, which you act as the intranet? And really, it's about understanding, as that end employee user, if I need to find some information about how I should behave in the organisation or how I might need some support in the organisation, where would I go, and is it clear to me as the employee where I can go to get that support? And the hope is that we can take that a step further. As Louise said, if somebody's starting to look at internal vacancies regularly, that could then be an alert back to HR that somebody potentially is a flight risk, or there might be some development requirements within a department. And a real simple example of this, we implemented something at Phase 3 called Wellbot. And it's a little app that sits on everybody's desktop. It reminds them to drink water regularly, stretch fingers, take breaks, stretch your ankles when you've not been stood up for too long. But it also asks you how you're feeling every day. And if an employee starts to say that their sentiment is getting lower, or that they have some concerns, or they're not very happy at work, it starts to drive through AI some content towards them around, for example, did you know that we have an EAP program? If you're struggling at home, there are some resources available here around how the work-life balance can be managed. And these are really simple tools, really cost-effective, they don't cost a lot, and it can make a big difference in terms of how you get data and how you interact with employees. And that is all anonymous. So we're not gathering that data and saying which employee has said that they need to access our EAP. It's completely anonymous and the system is doing that for us, but we just get notified that it is actually being used and we get to see the return on investment there. And in terms of this process, when you're doing this review, make a note of every single piece of friction that you find in this process. Anything that's not smooth, anything that's unclear. And it is difficult to try and take your HR hat off and forget the knowledge that you have around your HR processes. But if I was the employee doing this process, is this simple and can I really understand what I need to do? So the next step then would be around, first of all, forming the business case. So I always say when looking at business cases, use the business case process as the way to really ground your thinking in what you're trying to achieve in this process. What is it that you actually want to do? What are we trying to achieve? And if we think about hyper-personalization, like Louise mentioned, which are the groups of people that this is going to affect? And again, marketing teams would use a term called personas. So we can identify within organisations that there are a number of personas that we have. A new manager is one example that we've mentioned. If I'm a new manager in an organisation, what do I need to know that I've never known before? It could be that I've grown in the organisation and have been promoted to manager, but I'm not necessarily being given the toolkit that I need in order to manage a performance appraisal, for example, or have a difficult conversation. So there's different types of personas in the organisation need different information. And as Louise said, this could be based on the location that they work, the department that they work in. And something that I often champion is we think about the healthcare sector, for example. There are a group of staff who might work from home, but there are a big group of staff still on the front line where really nothing has changed. They've just got to wear more PPE now. And we need to take into account for those people, what is it that we want to achieve from this process and how can we remove those barriers? We'll also need to look at the potential options, and days like this are fantastic. It's brilliant that we're able to do this again online and in the actual stadium here today, because you can walk around these vendors. We're in the employee experience part right now, and you can ask them questions about their products. Predominantly in the past, we focused on transactional administration, compliance, how do we make sure our processes are followed step by step. But really now that takes second fiddle to the first thing, which is the employee experience. How will my employees and managers interact with your solution? What difference will it make to their lives? And how do we simplify it as much as possible? The other thing to ask as well is, have you actually ever spoken to your current provider about what they can do to improve the process? Often we think our system is broken, we need a new one, and we really do champion. Go back to your provider and speak to them as if you are a brand new prospect and ask them to demo the product to you as if you're somebody to be sold to, so that you can see what they're showing as the benefits to new customers. And that really helps in terms of identifying, do you need to switch? Is there more we can do with the current provider? But there are also lots of tools, Applaud we mentioned in the report that Louise discussed, and there are some around this area here that focus specifically on employee culture and employee experience. And so these can be solutions that sit on top of your current solutions. It's not necessarily a massive replacement project. And there are also tools such as Slack, Workplace by Facebook. These kind of things can be used, as we see in social media, to drive behaviour and to share communications and increase engagement. But in terms of creating the business case, the good business case will focus first of all on what are we trying to achieve? What's the impact going to be? Is that a financial impact? Is there an employee sentiment impact? Is there something around engagement, for example? And what are the strategic benefits that we can release from this project? For example, increases in productivity. We'd also need to understand what the costs might be. And again, that's why days like this are great, because you can get indicative costs from suppliers. But we also need to consider, how will this shape how the workforce works? Those employees Louise mentioned, where their only interaction with the business is on a screen, really need to have the same level of experience as those people that go into the office 3 days a week. And again, at Phase 3, we did a survey. We are hybrid workers. And we did a survey, an employee pulse survey of our teams that were at home and in the office. And one of the things that the team at home said is, people that are in the office always join meetings late. And it frustrates us because we're here on time. And the people in the office said, we come into the office and we spend all day on Teams with people who are sat at home. So we put a process in place to make sure that we respect each other's time. And it's things like this that really do feed into that employee experience, and are simple, small changes that can make a real difference. The next thing is, how will this impact well-being? This should be in every business case where we're talking about people services. And finally, the bottom line. HR are expected to understand the business, and we're expected to be able to show in business cases how something like this will impact the P&L and the bottom line of the business. So step 3 is around verifying. So we've written our business case, we've decided what we need to do, we've understood our challenges. Next, we want to understand what our plans are going to be. And first of all, we need to check, what assumptions have we made? So again, I'm going back to endpoints. Do we have a population of the organisation where there are things that cause them restrictions in terms of how they can access systems? So can I only access the HR portal if I'm on a issued device by the company, for example? Or can I access it over the internet? Is that possible? We've seen examples in the healthcare sector again, for example, where employees clock in and clock out on the way into work, and their only interaction with the system is touching that terminal, and maybe they can book a holiday request, but time is of the essence. They're not sitting there while they're booking a holiday with their phone open, also able to book a holiday request as well. So look at those endpoints and where the challenges could be there, and what we can do to unlock those challenges. We also need to understand, at this stage, does your strategy allow for changes in the future? So we've been through a massive change and we know that we had to make decisions rapidly. But now we've got a bit of time to plan for the next 3 years. What are we expecting to see? And the CIPD research that did a review of what the HR profession will look like in 2030 said that the way that we manage employees and the way that we employ employees in terms of the engagements and the contracts we have are going to be rapidly changing. The gig economy might become much more prevalent in organisations, and we might choose people for a skill that we need in the short term, and they understand that they might have multiple employments at the same time. So these are all challenges that we have to think about when we're implementing technology and focus. So we know that employees want to do great work which makes an impact, and in an organisation that cares about them and respects them more than just being human capital. So when you hear that statement, does that make you feel positive in terms of how your organisation operates? And do you feel that your current technology could help you achieve that? So again, as we said, part of the verification process is what you're doing here today. You're learning, you're finding out more, and you're here to talk to some of the providers potentially about what their systems do. Again, it could be that you see something really great and think, could my system do that? Go back and speak to your supplier and find out that as well. And next would be the stage where obviously we need to take action. So first of all, we'd have some form of implementation. That's the process of getting it out there. And we know that implementation won't occur until you've got a really strong communication and engagement plan with the organisation to understand how you're going to enact this change and what the impacts will be of that. And I always think with processes such as this, it's really important to make sure that the business as usual doesn't impact on the project. We see this time and time again. Business as usual is the death of change, because it means that employees get bogged down in that day-to-day and organisations don't free up the resource to actually invest in making that change. And it's really easy as an outsider in an organisation to say that, but it is critically important. You will never make change unless you allow time to do that. And you know, one of the quotes that I like when I think about things like this is dream big, start small, but start. We need to make sure that we're actually doing something to make those improvements. Those 1% improvements incrementally will make a difference. And starting small might look like starting with 1 or 2 processes. And if we're going to prioritise a process, let's prioritise recruitment and onboarding so that new employees get that digital experience from the outset. And then we can start to improve the experience for employees that are already with us as well. And the final step really is never being satisfied. So making sure that we are constantly reviewing our processes, constantly going back and doing that audit of our processes. Did we make the improvements we wanted to? How could we make further improvements in the processes we've looked at? And what's the next process that we need to tackle? And really paying attention to what the data is telling us. So if we're getting some insights now, what are we doing about that data? What are we learning from it? And what are we going to do then to make more change that's more positive? And what you've done as an internal process, I said at the start, focus on recruitment and onboarding potentially. Use that as a case study then to identify, did it work? What went well? What didn't go so well? And how could we make further improvements in other processes? So obviously we need to understand what the benefits are going to be. I've covered a few of them already. The first one is obviously the aim of all this is increased employee engagement. So we want employees to self-serve their engagement with the organisation. We can push the content out there. And it's one of our biggest frustrations when people say to us, this organisation doesn't communicate enough. We do. We know that in HR we have internal comms teams, managers do briefings, they have team meetings, information gets cascaded. But if employees can self-serve on that and certify to say, yes, I've read this, I've understood it, and it makes me feel better or it makes me feel worse, it gives us a lot more information to be able to work on. Accelerated development is also freeing up capacity within HR. Louise talked about agility, working at pace and the speed that we need to work at. This means that we'll be able to make more developments if we're freeing up some of that transactional admin that we have within the HR teams. And being business-centric, we know that people are one of the most important assets in any organisation. So the strategy is always improve things for the people, and essentially the business should improve too. And in terms of personalisation, we've talked about hyper-personalisation. As we said, that can be a simple start as employees who are onboarding into the organisation might have a different portal to somebody who's on board into a completely different part of the organisation. Start small, dream big. And obviously the most important is around well-being. So if we can implement processes that start to flag when somebody might need some support from the organisation without those social cues that Louise mentioned from seeing people in the office every day, well-being is something that we can improve, and there are lots of tools out there that will help with that as well. So at that stage, we ask if there are any questions. I think we might have had some submitted from the audience that are watching online as well. Louise, I think this is one for you.
Okay.
What does your team do to ensure the employee experience results in customer success?
Good question. So I think obviously here at Phase 3, we're a very people-centric organisation. So it's really important that people are our commodity. So it's imperative that you have a really close link with your people managers. And from there, you can focus with them on which employees are excelling and which employees might actually need a bit more support. Ultimately, my role is about customer success. So we capture our internal NPS score with our customers as well. And then that can show us whether or not we've been aligned. I think that's probably the easiest way to think about it. If you're a people-centric organisation, work closely with your people managers, work out an internal NPS score, and that will give you a really good measure of where you are as an organisation.
Okay. So a question, as we have employees moving back into the office and then some who always work remotely, how can we improve collaboration? So I think on this one, it will depend on the organisation. Sorry, I'll just come around you, Louise. We've been an organisation that's worked remotely and in the office for a long time, and I think when the pandemic happened, it wasn't necessarily such a big issue for us. But one of the things that I often promote in this is champion employees taking responsibility themselves for engagement as well. It's really important to set expectations with employees that we want you to attend our social calls, for example, that you have with your team. When you do that, it would be nice if you did turn your camera on, for example, or if we have one day a month where we say it's going to be a camera on day, let's just see how people are feeling. We also make sure that we do things such as you might have heard of Kahoot. It's an app that you can use, which it's a learning and development one, but you can do quizzes and get, again, employee sentiment. So we take information from products like that as well and help have more interactive sessions. And most importantly, we try and cover multiple channels. So there is nothing that we'll do in the office, for example, that we wouldn't do remotely as well. So if we have a whole company meeting and there are people in the office, it's also filmed on Teams and people can join remotely and contribute in the same way as if they were there in the room with us. And again, looking at those points of friction where people who are at home are frustrated that people in the office are always late for a meeting, and people who are in the office are constantly scared of having to kick other people out of a meeting room, which is a problem nice to have, to be fair. But again, it's about understanding where those friction points are and then looking at how we can make changes to improve that. So things like the employee pulse surveys will probably give us a lot of insight into that. I think we've probably got time for one more question, yeah? So how can we cope with generational differences when implementing a new HR technology? Some of our less tech-savvy employees are more hesitant to welcome new tech with open arms. I think, can I take the first bit of that one?
Yeah.
So it's interesting because I hear this, and I had an example when I worked in a local authority. We rolled out a new HR and payroll system, and we had a pensioners payroll. And we did a massive campaign with people saying, we're not going to post your pay slips out anymore. We want to make sure that you access them online because it's better for us, it's more environmentally friendly, and employees resisted against that. But we had a pensioner on our pensioner payroll at 98 who was the first person that signed up to get an electronic payslip because she wanted to see it straight away. So we sometimes make assumptions that certain generations won't embrace technology as well as others will. I know people who are at the opposite end of the scale who are completely scared of technology, but have grown up in Generation Z, for example. So I think it's about understanding where our challenges are in our organisation. Digital literacy is important, and that should be on every learning development pathway in an organisation. But fundamentally, the thing is, if we have a frictionless experience, there are very few people who don't use Netflix, Sky, Amazon, Facebook, book a holiday. if the system is as easy to use as that process, then there should be no reason why any employee should be prohibited from accessing our HR systems.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that is the end of the session now. We will be around. We've got copies of the report that we mentioned from Applaud as well, so if you want to take a copy of that, you can. And if you want to come and see us, we're on stand A40, or we'll stick around for a little while after as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.